This is the Dallas Morning News.
Welcome to the second season of Beyond Talking Points, an American Middle podcast. I'm Abby McCloskey. We're in the first 100 days of the second Trump administration. A lot's happening, and there are wildly different interpretations of what's going on. Some people love it, some people hate it. I think a lot of people are confused what to think, and so this spring we're going to get to the bottom of it together with some of the smartest and most thoughtful people in America. We'll talk all about tariffs, DOGE, immigration, make America healthy again, and more. Thanks for joining us. There's so much to talk about. Let's dive in. I'm here with Doug Holtz Eakin to talk about the economy and cost of living. Doug, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I was thinking about when we met, and I actually think I've known you, Doug, or we've known each other for my entire professional life. You run the American Action Forum, which is one of the most nimble, whip-smart, data-forward groups in Washington. And I think this is right, that you're one of only 10 humans who has run the Congressional Budget Office.
Well, I'm glad you think we're all humans. That's the important thing.
And so it's just such a privilege to be with you today to talk about the economy, because there's so much changing, even in the last few weeks. And I just want to kick it off broadly with what you make of the Trump economy 2.0, because what at least I'm seeing here in the heartland, so to speak, is a bit of a split screen. Like one screen we have, the news out from the Federal Reserve the week we're taping this, projecting weaker growth and higher unemployment and higher inflation than they had anticipated, even in December. And to the extent they're wrong, they think they might be being too rosy about the outlook. We're seeing consumer confidence drop. The markets have been all over the place. They were recently in correction territory, wiping out gains. We have the Treasury Secretary saying correction's a good thing. And even President Trump is saying we need a little pain because of where we're going. So that's like screen one. Screen two is Trump. And this is, quote unquote, our economy will boom like never before. We have home sales rising, beating expectations. Inflation's down. Unemployment is low. Manufacturing output is up. And the reality, at least according to the polling I've seen, is that historically voters have always trusted Republicans more on the economy, at least in the last 3 or 4 decades. And there were really good economic vibes from the first Trump term and really bad vibes from COVID and the inflationary spiral during Biden's administration. And so that this, screen two is like we're getting back to the good times, or at least it will never be as bad as it was under Biden. Doug, riff for me, like what do you make? Which screen is right? What is going on? How do we sort through this?
So I think the way to sort through it is the following. If this was December 31st and you asked me about the outlook, I'd say pretty good. I mean, we've got growth that's been at 3.1 and mid-twos over the past 3 quarters. Inflation's somewhere between 2.5 and 3, but maybe not at the 2% target, but low. And it's been that way for nine months, almost a year. So fairly stable. Unemployment's in the 4% range. What's not to like?
Yeah.
Then you say, well, what are the risks to your forecast? I said, well, yeah, most of them are policy risks. We're going to have to fund the government, raise the debt limit, deal with an expiring tax bill, potential $400 billion tax increase. So how those get dealt with are going to be risks. And then there's the incoming administration and what policies they adopt. All of that's going to determine the path of the economy. And now we roll the clock forward 2 months, and indeed we've got an economy that's weaker than that. I think that's fair. We have seen some real deterioration in business and consumer confidence. And, you mentioned all the market reactions. And I think the right way to think about that is, this is the impact of policies, and in particular the tariff policies. And the market's job is to react to new information. And so it's been reacting to everything the administration says, the president says, executive order signed, everything a Treasury or Commerce Secretary says on TV. And it's bouncing around because there's a lot of noise in there as opposed to the signal, like what are they really doing? And I think the same is true in these confidence numbers. But we're not in a recession. And while the economy's weakened somewhat, the path forward is still going to be determined by the degree to which we get continued deregulation, as we saw in the first Trump administration, and I'm confident we will. Whether we get a sensible pro-growth tax bill out of Congress, and there's every reason to hope that that'll happen. So I think the wild card is going to be the degree to which you can have the tariff policy work for the economy in the near term. And obviously the president's warning us that it might not. So that's a warning worth listening to carefully.
Yeah. And I've been intrigued by this warning of there might be some pain and that actually could be a good thing. And I don't know, like, is economic pain self-inflicted a good thing? Because part of me feels like we've forgotten to do hard things in this country. And we do have, a federal budget that's out of control. And we do have to know how to make sacrifices. We can't keep, spending more and having lower tax rates and kind of playing around like this. At the other hand, like, is what we're doing, especially related to tariffs, which I want to dig into, economically beneficial in the long run, do you think?
So when I take those separately, I mean, this sort of budget/DOGE question I view as largely public relations, not real. We have real budget problems, and they need to really be dealt with by taking on the large entitlement spending programs. Social Security and Medicare are more than one half of all non-interest spending over the next 10 years, and they're growing faster than anything else. And so we spend $400 billion a year on federal personnel costs. Suppose you cut that in half. You've got, $200 billion in savings in a $6.8 trillion spending bill. That's not how much they spend every year. It's just not enough. I mean, that's not really taking on the spending. So that awaits us in the future. It's not here yet. On the tariffs, I think, first of all, there are different kinds of tariffs. There are tariffs on steel, aluminum, cars, chips, pharmaceuticals, all of which are in place or have been promised, where the goal is to build a tariff wall and get firms to locate in the United States behind the tariff wall. And the ostensible reason to do this for national security. Yeah. I understand the logic of that. I mean, I do. I'm skeptical that it'll work. We've been saving the U.S. steel industry my entire adult life. I grew up in Pittsburgh, by the way, in a steel family. My dad ran steel mills. Tariffs are not going to save the U.S. steel industry. This is just, we tried in 2001, we tried in 2018, we're at 2025. This isn't going to solve it. It takes 15 years to build a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. Okay, well, that's not going to happen fast. And so that strategy is understandable, but I'm not sure it passes muster. What the American people have not been told is, what are we trying to accomplish by hitting our largest trading partners and our neighbors with 25% tariffs? What does 25% on Canada and Mexico do? I understand the pain, and those are going to be dramatic impacts in the economy, way worse than anything happened when we put tariffs on China. The question is, for what gain? You said, is it worth doing something bad? Well, it depends what's on the other side. And the administration never articulated an outcome they want, a path to that outcome, and what that outcome is worth to us. If there's things out there that make sense, then I can support it. But in and of itself, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And we'll see what reciprocal tariffs means on April 2nd. Right now, that's a black box. But absent any other information, these tariffs are very large national sales taxes that are very distortionary, highly regressive, and hard to administer. And if you said, Doug, would you like to have a national sales tax that's regressive, hard to administer, and very distortive? I'd say no. So give me a reason to go there.
So what about the reason of just kind of the system is rigged and the U.S. is getting ripped off? This is from Trump on Truth Social. Like, the U.S. doesn't have free trade, we have stupid trade. And I agree with you that I haven't heard an explicit end goal, with the exception of maybe building out American manufacturing or having political leverage or just having countries curry favor with us more specifically to kind of get our trade to a more desirable place. But what do you think is the best possible outcome of high tariffs on our North American trading partners? What does good look like there?
So there are two objectives that I think I could write down and sell you on. Number one is things they have said about fentanyl and border crossings and things. You could imagine renegotiating the USMCA, the trade agreement, with a side agreement on border efforts and cementing permanently an agreement on what Canada and Mexico would do at the border, what we would do at the border, and what constituted success at the border. That would also have to be ratified by the U.S. Senate, which means Democrats have to sign on, and we would, for the first time, have an agreement on what we're going to do with our borders. That's long overdue, and that's a very worthwhile objective in my view. If that's the sort of closet agenda, I'm on board. The other thing that I think that the administration would like, but they haven't really said it, is they want a customs union. They don't like the idea of putting tariffs on China and then have Chinese shipping to Canada and Mexico coming into the U.S. So they want to have a unified customs and border approach across the three economies. Also, not a crazy idea, something that they might want to mention out loud as what we're trying to accomplish. And, there is the downside that they'll have to give Canada and Mexico a say in how we do that, but I'm not sure they have that in mind. But those are things that I could imagine trying to do, honestly. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. From an economic point of view, it doesn't make any sense to just impose them and say, gee, I hope the stuff comes here. Moving the auto production across the border from Canada into Michigan is an enormously expensive 10-mile move. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, especially not if the policy could shift when Trump's out of office, for example.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk about the downside risk, because when I was in Washington at the American Enterprise Institute was around when President Obama had the 35% tariff on Chinese tires. So not, all of Canada and Mexico. This is specific item, specific country, Chinese tires. And there was a report that came out several years later that said, indeed, it saved 1,200 American jobs. And of course, that was the number the administration wanted to talk about. But it came at the expense of $900,000 per job, which was kind of well, man, if we were going to be supporting these jobs, it would almost be better to just do direct government hiring as opposed to having $1 million spent for jobs that are paying much less than that. And then not to mention all the collateral of the decline in retail and other things that happened when tires became more expensive. What does bad look like under this scenario where we're just kind of slapping tariffs on and using it almost, it feels like as a way to concentrate power to hand out favors if other countries do what we want?
I think there's a lot to that. I don't like it, but I don't think that's wrong. So here's some things that are true in 2025 that might not have been true in 2018. The entire world has seen him as president, watched him campaign, and they know all of this is coming. There are no surprises. This isn't like the first time he put a tariff on something and people lost their minds, couldn't imagine the U.S. doing this. They can easily imagine it. They've been waiting for it, and they're ready. So what are they going to do? They're going to retaliate, and so that's going to raise
retaliate. Just play it out for kind of a normal listener who's not an economist. What are we? Tell me what that looks like.
What is America good at? Well, we grow stuff. We have the greatest farmers on the planet, and we invent stuff. This is the most innovation-oriented large economy the world has ever seen, and they are going to put tariffs on the stuff we grow, and so they're going to target U.S. farmers first, and put tariffs on them. And they're going to target all our big tech companies and innovative advanced manufacturing. And so that pain will be real. People forget quickly that farming is such a big deal in the United States. We are a phenomenal agricultural economy. They also forget that we are the second largest manufacturer on the planet. Somehow the notion we're just hollowed out in this we've lost all our manufacturing is really misplaced. We have more manufacturing than Germany, Japan combined. I mean, China's bigger, but that's it. And our manufacturing is advanced. It's computer guided machine tools. It's not simple manufacturing. So we lose a lot if we don't export that. Those are high value exports, and we're going to see that retaliation hurt the things we do really well. And that's what concerns me is those downsides aren't being built into this. And it's not our imagination. Remember, last time he did tariffs on China, he turned around and put $15 billion into farmers because they were hurt so badly by the retaliation. It's going to be much worse this time.
Yeah, I don't think you and I have talked about this. So my grandparents were farmers. I grew up in Ohio, in Cleveland, and they were in Southern Ohio. And corn, soybeans, that was my Christmas, Easter, 4th of July was down on their farm. Anyhow, so if there's retaliatory tariffs against U.S. farmers, which would mean it's more expensive, right, for our farmers to sell their stuff to other markets. Doesn't that kind of create a glut of supply here, and all of a sudden food prices go down and food prices have been high and whatever, and that's good for American consumers? Help the non-economist understand that.
So, once the crops have been planted, it's sunk, right? You can't change it. So you're going to harvest them and sell them for what you can. And if there's a big glut, we're going to basically transfer income from the farmers, who are going to get very little, to consumers who are going to get some relief and they'll be happy. But not everyone wins. I mean, there are these concentrated losers in the supply side. But then the dynamics start. You think, okay, I'm not planting that much next year. We can't do that. And now we have taken, and instead of exploiting as fully as possible our very productive farm communities and exporting the surplus, we're telling them to do less. So let's take a very productive thing and tell it to don't do it. That doesn't make any sense. That as a national economic strategy, you don't want to do that. You want to take advantage of the things you're good at, not turn them down.
And what's your sense of this? I think there's a significant narrative that says that the kind of conservatism, especially the conservative economic policy that I grew up in. I mean, I was working for Koch, K-O-C-H. It was called like the Kochtopus at the time because it had so much money in all these different conservative organizations. And we were reading Hayek and Milton Friedman, and it was all about like free trade, free movement of people and capital and economic freedom. And there's a significant strain on the right that says, and where did that Wall Street Journal editorial board logic get us? Like it got us to a point where we have, significant inequality where we have people who can't raise a family on one income. And actually that whole kind of liberal economic, and by liberal, I don't mean progressive, I mean just like that open economic ideology got us a lot of pain too. So what's wrong with trying this other route? There were losers on the other path too. Like how do you respond to that?
So it is true that regime took real good care of market incentives and business incentives, but it didn't take good care of the labor force in the following sense. It perpetuated the notion that in the 21st century, you could do what the United States did in 1950. You could graduate from high school without ever really mastering anything and go get a factory job and raise a family of four.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. And to say that it should still be true is to mislead people. And to say we're going to bring back all manufacturing is to mislead people. You know, this is a much more competitive global economy. In 1950, the entire world had been at war, and the U.S. was the sole surviving unscathed industrial giant. And having a monopoly is a great thing. And you can have a lot of excess profits that you can pass on to labor, even unskilled labor. But that's not where we are now. There's no question about it. And so we should be honest with people and make our schools work and make sure people actually graduate knowing something and can compete in a competitive global economy and get jobs that do that. And remind everyone that manufacturing has been a success story because it's become much more productive. But that doesn't mean it needs fewer workers to produce the same stuff. And what frustrates me about this debate is 70% of what households buy are services. So most of what you want to buy is not a manufactured good. And less than 10% of the labor force is in manufacturing. But that's all we talk about. Well, what about the rest of the economy? Who's taking care of them? That's what I want to worry about. And that's the thing that a traditional conservative economic policy would have taken care of, because it didn't pick favorites. It didn't say it's manufacturing or bust, and it didn't use the power of the government to say we're going to be about manufacturing. And both sides are doing it now. CHIPS Acts are just, using the power of the government. Tariffs are using the power of the government. There's a quick appeal to the power of the government in both wings of the parties now, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, well, let's talk more about a traditional conservative economic orthodoxy, tax cuts and regulation. And this kind of let's lift off the artificial barriers put in place by concentrated power brokers in DC, and it's kind of let the market have its heyday. And I think one of the most successful parts of the first Trump administration was their a tax too strong, but on the regulatory thicket, and the promise to take out 2 regulations for every 1 imposed. And now it's really, amped up this time. They're going to take out allegedly 10 regulations for every 1 new one imposed. And, as well as anyone, that the Federal Register is like a catalog or newspaper of all the new rules that are coming out of Washington. And it was at its second highest level ever under President Biden. The first highest level was held by President Obama. And so tell me your thoughts on what this administration can do that would be helpful when it comes to addressing our regulatory regime.
So we keep track of the costs of the regulatory state. So when you pass a major rule, when you enact a major rule, you have to issue the estimate of what it will cost the private sector to comply with that rule. And we take those estimates at face value. They might not be right, but we take them at face value and we add them up. And if you added them up over 8 years of the Obama administration, they issued a costly regulation 1.1 costly regulations every day for 8 straight years, total of $890 billion of regulatory costs. Unbelievable. $100 billion self-tax increase every year. Under Mr. Trump, the first year was $5 billion. The second year was negative $5 billion. Third year was negative $10 billion. And then the last year when the pandemic hit, it was quite costly. The regulations that came with that. But for 4 years, he had about $40 to $50 billion of regulatory costs. Night and day different. Biden, 4 years, $1.8 trillion. Unbelievable. So it's not going to be hard for this president to improve on the sort of regulatory environment. He can do what he did last time, which is just say, hey, you, HHS, have a budget for regulations. It's zero. So if you create new regulatory costs, get rid of some others. And that's what he did last time. It worked very well. It'll work well again. I'm quite optimistic on that front. The first time he did this, I was skeptical. I didn't think it could be done. I was wrong. I'm happy to see that again. All that's doing is saying, let's do regulations when they're worth it. And let's keep track and budget. And that's a very sensible idea. I think it's going to be fantastic. So that's something that the small business community in particular has always pointed to as it was a big help back when he became president. I think it will be again.
Yeah. And, related, the signature legislative achievement of the first Trump administration was the tax cuts and Job Act. But I want your help in thinking through this, because I think from the Democratic side, there's a narrative that all of those tax cuts went to reward, big companies, and the benefits of those don't flow down to normal consumers, and it went to mostly to rich people. And then on the Republican side, basically it paid for itself with amazing economic growth, and it helps, reduce the size of government and help us sort through this, because at least big chunks of that legislation are back up for reauthorization this spring.
So the 17 Act was the first major tax reform since 1986, and and people always focus on the tax rates and rich people, but the reality really is it was a major business tax reform that transformed the U.S. from a really uncompetitive location with the highest corporate rate and a worldwide system of taxation, and brought us into alignment with our competitors. 21% is in the middle of the pack. We now tax more on what you do just in the U.S. as opposed to worldwide. It's been enormously successful. Prior to the 17 Act, we lost the headquarters of about 5 firms every year. There were these pitched battles that you can remember over Benedict Arnold firms leaving the U.S. And that ended. There was one firm that was leaving when the bill passed. It came back. No one has moved out since. The capital is flowing into the United States. The intellectual property used to be parked in Ireland. It's now parked in the United States. That was an enormously successful effort to make the U.S. a place to be on the globe and do business. And the workers benefit from that. And the wages have risen, and we've seen the productivity rise. And there's no reason not to be just enormously happy with that. And then there will always be disagreements about how progressive the individual income tax rates should be. I understand that. But what gets lost in that fight is more than 1/2 of business income is taxed on individual returns as, quote, pass-throughs, subchapter S corporations, partnerships. So if you raise the individual rate, that's a big business tax increase. And it's going to hurt capital accumulation and hiring and wages and all that stuff. So some judicious use of tax policies in order there. I think they have a chance to sort of, re-up that this year. I think they should. I think the biggest concern is for the Republicans in this effort is that what they're really going to do is continue more of the same. They're going to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's not going to be a huge new tax cut or a huge new impetus to growth. It's going to be maintaining what we have, which is a good thing. The alternative
What about
is to
all
raise
the
taxes a lot, and that's a bad idea.
Well, a couple things. I mean, one is the last number I saw that they were debating about for the tax bill this spring is around $5 trillion. They're trying to bring it down to $4.5 trillion, which is a huge cost. And the estimates I saw of Trump's 2017 tax legislation was that the growth didn't entirely pay for it.
No, it doesn't pay for itself. So don't get me wrong. It doesn't. And when you say that it's going to, cost, $4.75 trillion, that statement is that we will give up a tax increase of $4.75 trillion. And that's true. There's no way around that. And if you care about the deficit, as I do, and the debt, as I do, you can't just do that and blithely ignore it. You have to have some other plan. And I think the Achilles heel of the Congress administration continues to be its inability to come to terms with our debt. And they're not going to come to terms with it this year, no matter what they say. And they're going to do some probably pretty good tax policy, but it's not going to pay for itself and it's not going to solve that problem. And that problem remains.
And what about, again, in kind of the conservative party that I remember, it was kind of against handouts, at least in theory.
Yeah.
And now I feel like
Yeah.
now when you look at what they're debating for taxes, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Maybe we hand out cash as like a child tax credit. Maybe there's a DOGE stimulus cash. Like, there seems like there's a lot of either relief or pumping money into kind of various different buckets.
So I have a PhD in economics and I had a specialization in tax policy, and I'm the former editor of the National Tax Journal, and I care a lot about tax policy. And there's a term for that stuff. It's called junk.
Very sophisticated of you, Doug.
None of those proposals should excite anyone. They're not there to make the economy perform better. You're right. They're there to reward particular constituencies. And that's how, liberals do business. That's not how conservatives should do business. And it doesn't serve everyone well.
Okay. I think something that is very, and I say this as a conservative, but that's frustrating to folks on the other side of the aisle, is that support for the Democratic Party remains like extremely low. I think it's a 29% favorable rating, 54% unfavorable rating. And this is in the midst of markets jumping all up and down and being scared about Trump tariffs and et cetera. So if you were you, but advising a Democratic administration, like what would you be advising them to push on?
So the Democratic Party has given up on the private sector as a source of economic growth and prosperity. Their only answer is government. And it's very sad. That wasn't always true. And they need to rediscover what people do in their lives and get up and go to work. And they do to do something with American businesses, small, medium, large, other than criticize and beat them up. There are any number of people I know who lifelong Democrats, and they voted for Trump even though they really dislike him personally, really don't admire a lot of what he's done, and really don't like his foreign policy. But they got sick of the Democrats beating up business every day. And so I think that they've lost track of something very important, which is that this is still, by and large, a private sector economy, and it's the largest, most successful enterprise that the world's ever seen. They should reward and improve that, not ignore and otherwise abuse it.
And what about for Republicans in Congress and Trump? And what they should be doing to support the economy, because I kind of think, going back to how we started with the split screen, like there are some really good pro-growth traditional steps that could be taken, and cleaning up the tax code, certainly pulling back on the regulatory stuff. There's a lot of noise, I think, on DOGE not necessarily addressing our budget problems and creating a lot of chaos within the industry of Washington, which I think some people are happy to see, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. And then certainly a lot of, I would say, not just noise, but significant downside risk from all the threat and imposition of tariffs. And so kind of if you were back in the inner team here, what would you advise they do at this point? Understanding that they've done everything they have done, that there's a threat of all these tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, and April 2nd's looming, and DOGE is on the march, and there's a big tax bill coming forward, and the regulatory stuff is good. Like, How would you help clear this for them to give us a good, solid, sustainable economy that businesses can actually make decisions inside of?
So I think you've said a couple of things. Number one, something sustainable, something permanent. Pick a policy regime, stick to it. Negotiation shouldn't be your way of governing it. They should be a means to an end. And this president likes to negotiate, and that becomes the activity. And that doesn't provide the environment you need to do business planning and be successful. And so can you change someone's instincts? I'm skeptical, but that's part of what's going on. The second thing that's going on in the big picture that's different from when you and I were considered conservatives is that conservatives respected the values of others. And one of the reasons conservatives like markets as a way of doing things is people got to express their values by choosing which companies they bought from and which products they consumed and which ones they didn't. And we respected those decisions, and we trusted people to know what they want and take care of their lives. And a centerpiece of traditional conservatism is keeping the government out of the way of people, because we did respect their values and letting them do what they want. Progressives don't respect people's values. They tell them how to live their lives, and did so in a very heavy-handed and ultimately distasteful fashion. But this administration is also telling people that they know better than the American people what they need, and they're going to use tariffs to get them there. And they're not smart enough to know what cars to drive. They're smart enough and they can't drive those foreign cars. Let's have them here. And I'd ask them to listen more and dictate less. I think that would be important.
Yeah. And, two questions to end on. One, because think tank question, outside of the halls of powers, it seems really hard to have a sustainable and predictable tax and regulatory and budget and tariff environment if we're swinging so hard from left to right with our country as polarized and divided as it is. Is there a mechanism to help stop that swing?
The mechanism is to have the government less involved, right? I mean, you do the swing because it matters so much, and you want to control your values. But if what the government's doing is a much more constrained role, if it's not sort of dictating wide swaths of what's going on, you care less, and so the swings become less dramatic. And so, I think we've just allowed the government to get overly entangled in too many things, social issues, and a lot of this is driven by social issues and woke considerations, and really that really are not well handled by federal national politicians. That's not the place for those debates to happen. They should happen closer to the ground, and I think that would minimize this sort of volatility.
Yeah, and to close here, Doug, what is an economic talking point that drives you crazy? Because you do have your PhD and you did run the CBO, and there are a lot of strange things happening in our economy right now in economic policy. What drives you the most crazy? Oh,
that I can't. That's such a long list. As you know, I write a morning email that a lot of people have told me says, that's just, nice of you to put such thought into economic issues every day. It's just personal therapy. I mean, I'm ready to lose my mind almost every day because of something. And not whether it's tax cuts paying for themselves or manufacturing being hauled out and gone, or we can't touch Social Security and Medicare, or, we don't pay the tariffs other countries do. They all drive me crazy, right? Let's have a reasoned debate based on the facts. That's all I dream of.
Oh, Doug, me too. It's great to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm Abby McCloskey, and this is Beyond Talking Points, where we talk about what America was promised and what we're getting. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you next week.